chair of the Climate Change and Ecology Policy and Accountability Committee. Councillors James and Antonades.
Hello.
That's right. Come on, sit down. And we have Councillor Harcourt online, who's not very well, so he's listening in online. Before we can begin, there's some housekeeping points to cover for the meeting. We're being live streamed on YouTube. By taking part, you are consenting to be recorded. Please, can officers introduce themselves before speaking for the first time? And would everyone please use their microphones, which is the right-hand button in front of you, and turn them off when you're not speaking. There are tea, coffee and biscuits available in the staff kitchen. That door there next to reception, and the toilets are on my left-hand side. You will need a security badge to get into the kitchen and other office areas. So there is a lady with a security badge and there's a chap there, both with security badges, so they can take you through there. If the fire alarm sounds either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting, and please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the staff fire exit, which is behind me to the right. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Riverside Gardens. Fantastic. Let's proceed to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I think we are all here. No apologies. Declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. The minutes. Do members agree the minutes of the meeting held on 19th of November 2024? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. And the revenue budget. I'm pleased to have Councillor Ree here to talk us through that. Councillor Ree will give us an overview and introduce the agenda item. There will be 2 PowerPoint presentations outlining the corporate position and as well as the service position. The officers will introduce themselves as we go along, if that's okay. Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you very much, Chair. You were very efficient at that. I had a mouthful of biscuit and I was trying to get it all down. Well, thank you very much, Chair, for inviting me along this evening, and to everyone on the committee for their interest in the revenue budget for 25-26. I wanted to start, obviously I'm sorry that Councillor Harcourt isn't here, because I wanted to start by thanking all of my Cabinet colleagues and all of the officers who've worked so hard to help us put this balanced budget together. It's no mean feat doing this in the current climate. So everyone has worked incredibly hard to make sure that we get to where we are, to identify the efficiencies that we need in order to balance the budget, and to make sure that we've got money available to invest in the services that residents in Hammersmith and Fulham really rely on and really value. I'm going to talk through the broader corporate budget, and then the officers are going to step in and talk about some of the areas that might be of more interest to this committee. So I'll just kick off with a bit of a general overview of the budget. So this year we have a net general fund revenue budget of £221 million for the year. As I say, it's a difficult time to be putting together budgets within local government. Our revenue funding is down from 2010 to last year. We had a reduction of 54% in real terms, in terms of the grant that we get from central government. In cash terms, that's a reduction from £164 million to £132 million. Now, there aren't many organisations that could be expected to carry out the same services they were carrying out 15 years ago with less than half of the resources available. But here in Hammersmith and Fulham, not only have we managed to protect all frontline services, but we're also providing extra services as well that we know that residents value. Things like our free home care policy, things like free breakfast for primary school children, things like our local law enforcement teams that are keeping our streets safe and clean. But it's not just the reduction in our revenue grant that's proving tricky. Whether it's over a decade of a sluggish national economy or changing demographics, these are having a huge impact on demand for services in the borough as well, which puts additional strain on council budgets. We've got an ageing population in the borough. That means more and more people are relying on some of our social care services. Also, the fact that people are feeling the effects of the economy mean that they are more reliant on council support. So we're seeing this change in terms of how people interact with the council and the increase in demand for support. That said, there has been some good news this year. As part of the budget, there was a range of new support offered for local government. I think the slide sets out, oh, sorry, if you could skip to the next, no, just the second one. So there are a number of additional bits of revenue no, the revenue budget overview. Yeah, thanks. So there's a number of areas of spending where central government have given more money to local government. Hammersmith and Fulham gets a small slice of these, but an extra £1 billion for the household support fund, something that the last government cancelled, is very much welcomed. An extra £1 billion for SEND services, and 6% cash terms increase in our core spending core spending power. These are all welcome improvements, but at the moment still represent only a small drop in the ocean compared to the 54% cut that we've seen. So the objectives of our financial strategy when we're trying to put a budget together, first and foremost, I think like every area of government, our main priority is keeping the public safe. And that's something that this budget does, and I'll move on to that a little bit later. We're also trying to protect the statutory services and those extra services that I mentioned that local residents value that are unique to Hammersmith and Fulham. Growth is a bit of a buzzword at the moment in terms of national politics, but here in the borough, we're trying to improve prosperity locally through things like our industrial strategy, which is already generating excellent returns and will make it easier to bring in. In terms of how we operate ourselves as a council, we want to make sure that we're as efficient as possible, as innovative as possible, but also that we're well run and have money put aside for a rainy day. And last, but certainly not least, we're very proud of our record where it comes to tax rates here in Hammersmith and Fulham. We have the third lowest council tax in the country, and maintaining that is something that we're very keen to do and something that we always will do. So if you move on to the highlights of the budget, this is a budget that funds the fight against crime and antisocial behaviour here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Somebody once said, you need to be tough on crime, but tough on the causes of crime as well. And that's what this budget does. We've got investment in our local law enforcement team to protect that for the future. Investment in our innovative gangs unit, which keeps young people out of life and crime and chokes off organised crime at the roots. We're investing new money in prevention of violence against women and girls, which builds on the PSPO that was published last year. We were the first borough in the country to outlaw street harassment across the whole of the borough. It's an excellent initiative, and we're putting more money into making sure that we don't see any more violence against women and girls in the area. But also in terms of the prevention, we're investing in our school attendance strategy to make sure that people are in school and keeping out of trouble. And through our digital inclusion strategy, we're giving people the skills to identify fraud, the fastest growing crime in the UK. Another area that we're very keen to invest in is protecting our statutory services. Now, one of the big issues facing local government across the country is that there are a number of responsibilities that councils have that they're required to carry out by law, but aren't necessarily given funding for. Things like social care, things like providing care for children. Homelessness is another great example. And because we are seeing an increase in demand for all of these services, it's really important that we make sure that these are properly funded, because we have an obligation to provide these services when people present with a need for them. And if we don't put money aside for it, then it means that the council runs into financial difficulty later on in the year. So that's why we have invested in these core statutory services. And so we want to make sure that we're providing the best service possible for those who need the council most. And then there are another couple of areas I wanted to highlight that we're investing in. Upstream, the industrial strategy that I mentioned earlier. This has been hugely successful so far, generating £6 billion of new investment into the borough, creating 13,000 new jobs as part of our industrial strategy. We want to make sure that the next stage of this is linking it up with the community, making sure that everyone in Hammersmith and Fulham benefits from this. And this isn't just some great spaceship that comes and lands in the White City, but the people living in the area don't get the benefit of. We're investing in climate change and making sure that we're putting the resources aside that are sufficient to allow us to make the changes that we need to combat climate change and the effects of climate change. And we're also investing in our sports facilities that residents value, although presumably not on nights like this. If we move along to, this provides just a bit of an overview of the budget. You'll see there, we're putting aside money for inflation, 2% for pay inflation, 2.7% for prices. This is important because, as we know, inflation in recent years has been pretty up and down, more up than down. Luckily, we're not dealing with the 11.1% inflation that we had under the previous government, but we need to make sure that we are building in these buffers so that as prices rise, we've got the funds to meet our needs. This budget provides £12.3 million of new investments in services. We'll go through that in a moment, and £5.1 million of efficiencies. So these savings are incredibly important. We start each year with a budget gap because as prices are going up, to provide the same services, just keep staying where we are, we need to move forward. And so it's really important that every year we're finding cost saving and protecting those key services. Also, you'll see here a £7.8 million increase in government grants, which I touched on at the start of the presentation. If we move on to our investment proposals, as you'll see here, the £3.4 million that goes towards the law enforcement team, the gangs unit, and preventing violence against women and girls. This is the major investment in our budget, but also £2.8 million to provide a safer buffer in adult services, £2.2 million for children's services, £1.8 million for our waste services to make sure that we're properly collecting everyone's rubbish and making sure that as much of it as possible is recycled. And then £1.2 million that we're allocating to housing solutions, that's preventing homelessness, as well as the homeless prevention grant as well, which is going straight to that. In terms of savings, this gives a bit more detail about where that £5.1 million comes from. Generally, most of this, the idea is prevention is better than cure. By providing a small investment up front, you can prevent problems developing and becoming more costly later on. And so that's where the bulk of our savings have come from this year, although there's a bit more information there. When it comes to council tax, as I say, we're very proud to have the third lowest council tax in the country here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Band D council tax in 24-25 was just £915. With the increase this year, that'll be an increase of just 88p a week. That obviously only applies for people who are paying the full amount here in Hammersmith and Fulham. We have one of the most comprehensive council tax support schemes in the country as well. 4 in every 10 households qualify for some sort of exemption. And we're one of just 3 London councils that provide a 100% exemption for the most vulnerable. So those least able to pay the least. This slide just provides a bit more detail about where the money is going through the different departments. As you'll see, the Place Department, which this committee covers, is receiving £5.6 million in growth, as well as inflation money, and has made £2 million worth of savings. We move on to our reserves. So for the last 2 years, the council has actually run a budget surplus. So we've been increasing the money in our general balances at a time when most councils across the country have been taking theirs out just to make ends meet. I think that's really important, and it shows just how key ruthless financial efficiency is to everybody across the council. It's not just something that's held in the finance function. Every officer in every department is always thinking about how to be as effective and as efficient as possible. The second row on this table is earmarked reserves. So where the first one, general balance, is what I like to think of as a rainy day fund, earmarked reserves are really for smoothing out large investment that comes in single years. So the idea is, if, for instance, we know that we need to make a £1 million investment in IT systems in the future in 4 years' time, rather than waiting for 4 years and then finding £1 million in the budget, we can put aside £250,000 a year, and then we know that we've got the funds available. So the earmarked reserves are set aside for particular projects, and you can see how those go up and down over the next few years, depending on what they're needed for. In terms of balancing the budget in future years, obviously I've mentioned upstream, which is generating new investment in the borough and creating prosperity. That'll lead to an increase in business rates, which will improve the amount of money coming into the council. We're undertaking a number of corporate transformation programs and modernising the way that the council operates, which will save us money and hopefully enable us to provide services more effectively and more efficiently. We've been able to generate more than £100 million of community infrastructure levy and Section 106 money. In fact, this year we generated £22 million, which is a record because of the way that we're able to negotiate with property developers to make sure that they're making a contribution to the borough as well as benefiting from it. We're really stepping up our efforts to get as much money as possible from national grants and national programs. That's particularly important when it comes to green issues and sustainability. There are a number of sources for new investments, and we need to make sure we're targeting as many of them as possible, and we've been pretty successful at that over the years. We want to make sure that we're getting everything that we can get our hands on in the future. And finally, we'll continue to run as efficient a council as possible. We'll pursue ruthless financial efficiency. So far, we've been able to save £133 million in efficiency savings since this administration came to power. The low-hanging fruit, I think it's fair to say, has been picked, but there's always more savings available, and we're going to make sure that we're looking for them, and I'm going to make sure that we find them. Now, in terms of the next steps, I'm doing my tour of the Policy and Accountability Committees at the moment. I'm glad I came to this one early because this is my favourite, but I'll be going to these for another couple of weeks. And then we'll take the budget to Cabinet for the 10th of February, and then the full council will get a chance to vote on it on the 26th. Just before I hand over to officers, I just want to repeat again my thanks to everyone who's been involved. I know Andre and Kelly I've dealt with very closely when it comes to making sure that the numbers all add up. But Bram and everyone in the team has done an absolutely fantastic job of delivering this balanced budget. It's although I'm the one who gets to come here and talk about it, it's everybody else's work that I'm claiming credit for. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ree. I'm so glad this is your favourite PAC. So we'll hand over to officers. I think we're gonna carry on with the presentation. Would you introduce yourself and then carry on? Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kelly Gooch. I'm Head of Finance for the Police Department. Just wait for the presentation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more detail about the revenue budget for the new financial year as far as it affects the services within this committee. So a few about achievements relevant to this PAC. So we have the highest concentration of electric vehicle charging points in UK, and we have the largest concentration of air quality monitors in Europe.
Sorry, can I hang on 1 second? If anyone wants to move their chair to see a screen, you're more than welcome. Should we give you 1 minute? Do you think we could turn that? Sorry about this. No, that one, I think. Sorry, Kelly. Yeah. Councillor, is that okay for you?
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. I'll start that one again. So achievements relevant to this PAC, just gives you a bit of context as to the sort of things that we spend this money on. So we have the highest concentration of electric vehicle charging points in the UK and the largest concentration of air quality monitors in Europe. We've been recognised by UK Divest as amongst the most successful local authority pension funds in divesting from fossil fuels. We've been promoting active travel. We're trying to create a legacy of cycle-trained young people in particular, to delivering bikeability for families and green local deliveries through the Parcels Not Pollution cargo bike scheme. And we are recognised leaders in environmental action. We've been given an A rating from the Carbon Disclosure Project for our transparent and bold climate action and commitment. We've also been rated by the Climate Emergency UK as having London's best climate emergency plan. We've also launched the H&F Green Investment. It's the largest scheme of its kind, and we're targeting 5 million of funding from our community. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in my presentation. In terms of budget implications that are relevant to this particular PAC, so Councillor Ree mentioned we will be adding 2% in inflation to the staffing budget for the climate and ecology team. We're also investing an extra £120,000 every year for ongoing investment in climate change projects and activities. So that will be used to continue to fund things like energy efficiency grants, rewilding campaigns, ecology projects, climate engagement and low-level match funding for some grants. And just to point out that there are no budgetary savings for the services relevant to this PAC. Although the climate and ecology team sits within the Place Department, its role is to influence spending across the wider council. So we want to ensure that spending across the whole council is aligned with the climate and ecology aims of the council. We're also looking to maximise climate action at the least cost to the council, and since 2021, the team successfully secured £18 million of external grant funding, and that has enabled the delivery of climate-related projects with a value of £33 million. The council continues to encourage developers to build carbon neutral developments, and where that's not possible, we do collect carbon offset receipts from developers that we reinvest. They're ring-fenced receipts, so we reinvest that in projects with a like-for-like carbon reduction. And finally, on budget implications, I mentioned earlier about we're driving forward the H&F Green Investment. So that is an innovative community investment scheme aimed at engaging local residents and businesses in H&F's climate and ecology aims. And I know we've brought papers to this PAC on that in the past. When we launched that, it's the largest scheme of its kind. And as I mentioned, we're looking for £5 million worth of funding to be raised from the local community, so residents, businesses, anyone else who would like to invest to help us raise money for reinvestment here. Just to point out, it's cheaper than borrowing from more traditional means. So traditionally, the council borrows when it needs to from the Public Works Loans Board. And this form of borrowing from the community is much cheaper and represents a saving for us. And to date, we've raised more than any other council from this green investment. We've raised nearly £1.8 million, and that has been reinvested in lots of green schemes. So things like active travel measures, improving urban green spaces, and helping to roll out sustainable drainage. And in March, we'll become the first council to launch its third tranche of the Green Investment Scheme. So again, we're continuing to push ahead and try to raise the full £5 million. And in terms of budget risks relevant to this PAC, so you won't be surprised to hear me say, of course, to address the climate and ecological emergency requires significant amounts of funding, so far beyond anything that this council can afford within its existing revenue and capital budgets. So we will be looking for additional external funding, so government funding where available. Obviously, that's difficult at the moment. Private investment where we can get that. So that's something that we're working towards at the moment. Other risks, so you heard Councillor Ree talk about inflation continues to be a risk for us, whilst we provide for some of that within our budgets. That is continuing to have an impact on service spend and current service contracts. And what it ultimately means is where we do secure grant funding, it doesn't go as far as it would have done in the past. There's also risk relating to potential national public finance pressures, and that could impact on our ability to get specific grant funding, which could affect specific projects. And lastly, we have an ongoing pressure and challenge to secure funding for all the ambitions that we have in the H&F plan, so far as they affect climate and ecology. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Does anyone have any questions on that bit?
Thank you very much for your reports, and thank you, Councillor Ree, for your presentation. Just briefly, so at full council, we had a report on the air quality plan 25 to 30. My comment on this plan was there isn't sufficient funding to deliver anywhere near the projects required for the ambitious targets. So I read when I was not shocked when I was reading the papers to find only an extra 120,000 towards that. How do you guys aim to fund these ambitions? Are you solely seeking central government funding to help fund these projects, or do you expect future investment at future budgets?
John Gawser, the Director of Climate Change and Transport. I think the team's role really is an influencer in terms of things that are going to happen. So to achieve our climate targets, there's lots of it requires on individual actions and company actions and their own investment in the change, and we're helping with that. But mainly, most of the investment is going to come from the outside in when it's available. The thing with the government grants is we're really reliant on when they release them in the different tranches and for the particular topics, and they're not always clear when there is going to be. So we just on top of it at the minute rises is really where we're at with that.
Thank you. And I just have one more question, particularly on the parklets and on Wandsworth Bridge Road and future streetscaping projects. Could you, if you know, how much have you spent on those to date? How much do you plan to spend? As this strikes me as a council that is so proud of being ruthlessly financially efficient to be a giant waste of taxpayers' money.
So that's actually all been cost neutral from the scheme down in South Fulham anyway. So we always promise to reinvest any money that was gathered from the tickets back into that high street. The parklets there are temporary at the moment to rebalance the traffic, to actually try and get what was a through route back into a high street again for the community, which is what they've asked for down there. So that's what we're doing. So what will happen is once we've got the layout designed, those parklets will move on to the next location to do the same thing. So they'll get reused and reused and reused. And they're probably going up in the north of the borough next when it's time.
Thank you for that. I can assure you it's not been cost neutral. The small businesses across that road have felt the impact quite detrimentally. And to correct you, yes, it is a high street, but it's also a main A road.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions. Just a 2% on staff, does that mean you're going to actually lose a member of staff, or 2% doesn't seem much in terms of inflation being higher than that over the last couple of years?
Yes, so that's an extra 2% being added to the budget to recognise the fact that pay will also increase by an amount not yet known, because we don't yet know what we'll be paying our staff in the new financial year. That will get agreed sometime during the year. But in the budget, we're estimating that there could be a pay award or inflation of around 2%. So it's adding 2%, not taking it away.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, but it didn't seem very much, actually. I thought that was quite conservative, considering inflation's being quite high and impacted people's cost of living. And therefore, you know, the more we eat into people's salaries, then with lack of inflation, but I do appreciate it's probably to do with the financial ability.
Yeah, so every year we add a certain amount for inflation. So in previous years when inflation's been higher, we've obviously had to put more money in, and that's impacted how much we can spend on new services. It's similar for contracts as well. Lots of contracts will be linked to inflation, so you need to have these buffers in there so that when contract prices go up, the council's able to pay for them without having to cut something else. Generally, we've been pretty good at keeping wages within budget. That's something that we've always tried to do to make sure we are working as efficiently as possible. But this does mean, you know, you're absolutely right, people deserve to be paid, and this gives us scope to be able to increase people's salaries as costs go up.
Thank you for that. Councillor James?
Thank you very much. I was just wanting to ask a further question about the green investment. You said it's been the most successful in terms of the amount it's managed to raise so far. Could you just give us an indication of why you think that is?
Yes, because we're one of the early adopters of this type of sort of borrowing, so that not many councils started at the time that we had started, you know, only a handful or so. And since we've started, we've done a second tranche. We're one of the very few councils to have gone for a second tranche. We're going to be the first council to go for a third tranche. So we're aiming for £5 million over in a phased way. So that's why we're trying to aim for it in individual tranches, so that that allows us time to build and sustain effective communications. So this is all really about telling people what we're trying to do about climate and ecology and those sort of schemes we're trying to progress. It's not just about trying to raise the money more cheaply. I know that's an added bonus. So yeah, so we know what others have raised. We all use the same investment platform, so it's all out there. It's very, very visible, and I'm very pleased that we have, you know, raised more than anyone else so far.
Awareness raising as well as finance raising.
Absolutely, that's the primary aim of this scheme, is to raise that awareness. So yeah, we have other means of borrowing available to us, but we would not get that same exposure on trying to get the messaging out and get people engaged with what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think actually engagement is exactly the right word for it. So I always say it's a win-win-win, right? It's a win for the council because we're able to borrow money slightly more competitively than we would otherwise. It's a win for the environment because it means we get to invest in all these excellent projects that are helping us fight climate change. And it's a win for investors as well. People living locally who decide they want to put money into the scheme, they get a long-term, low-risk investment, and they get money back. And they get that nice warm feeling to know that they're doing something good with their savings. But actually, it's the engagement of all the people who are in this room who've got an interest in climate change. It's the engagement with people who want to make this borough a better place. That's what's really been driving it. Yeah, I've been really heartened by the way that people have taken to this, and I'm going to the Green Finance Institute tomorrow to talk about how we can make sure that these things are rolled out more widely and more people will be able to take advantage of it.
Thank you for that. Really good. Do you want to ask? Pardon?
Yeah, just
Councillor Antinades.
Thank you very much. It's all looking very positive. It's really just a follow on the green investment, and have there been any kind of thoughts of linking up with our partners with the industrial strategy and further incentives to give to them? Not saying it's mandatory, but like maybe give them a lower rate if they buy more into it, or for a certain period of time. I don't know if there's any leverage there.
So I think the first two rounds were aimed more at residents from the borough, but you're absolutely right that there's a big market out there in terms of local businesses who can invest as well. We probably need to do a slightly better job of pushing that specifically to local businesses. As I say, the first two rounds were aimed primarily at residents. But yeah, it's great for any business that's looking to improve their corporate social responsibility. It's great for any businesses looking to improve their treasury management function if they want to put aside some money for medium term and know that they're going to get a decent return on it. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more engagement with upstream and the businesses involved in the industrial strategy, and hopefully that'll have a big impact too.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Councillor Ree. Also, let's go back to the parklets, because I'd like to ask John to maybe expand a bit on the parklets and how much it is costing us. But also, I'd basically like to make the point that actually we're trying to improve the ecology, part of the climate change mitigation and ecology policy of the council is to try and improve the quality of the air. And if John, you're saying we're managing to do some of this ecology, a lot of this ecology financially zero, and it's not costing us money. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think when the schemes originally conceived, part of the commitment to the residents with the, there's enforcement cameras going up there for people who get fined. We would reinvest that fine money back into the local area in that regard. So that was always the commitment from the council back when the first schemes were generated. But a lot of this is a new way of trying to rebalance the road space, and over the years it's been more and more car dominant, and that's been taking the present, but it's actually been at the cost of lots of the community and the retail and the high streets that have happened in the borough. I've been on a tour today and all up around Uxbridge Road and all around there, and it's the same story. That's all over the borough and all over London, in all honesty. So trying to find innovative ways to be able to try reclaim that space without too much detriment is part of why everything's in temporary materials, because you've got to keep rejigging it until you've got the balance right. Because what you don't want to do is commit to a scheme, spend a lot of money, and it's all wrong in terms of it doesn't give you the outcomes. So this is the most financially prudent way of doing it, is use temporary materials. You can move them to another location, rinse and repeat. So that gives the best outcomes for the borough in terms of cost and getting the right scheme for the people.
Thank you very much. And another question is a bit more about the accounting. When we have spoken over the months of different areas that the council is developing the green strategy, it's in every department. So in procurement, we're asking for a green balance, as it were, in mitigation, and in planning, and in every department. So how do we sort of do the accounting for our green credentials? How do we add it up? Is that a silly question?
No, not a silly question at all. So the idea of sort of climate budgeting is a relatively new idea, really, that's trying to be developed better and sort of more robustly in councils quite generally. So we have got a piece of work underway where we're trying to do exactly that, assess what we're spending and where, and the impact that it has on the climate. So we're at the early stages of that, and we're no different really to other councils. There are the odd one or two councils that are a bit more advanced in that work, but so we're trying to look across to other councils as well and see what they're doing. So we haven't got the answer at the moment, but it is something that we're trying to work on to get that overview. But you mentioned procurement, so we do have climate implications are embedded in all of our procurement decisions. So at that point, Hinesh and the team will challenge departments and services across the whole council as to what they're spending and what impact that has on the climate. So it's an evolving sort of piece of work at the moment, but it is something that we're conscious of and that we're trying to move forward.
Thank you. Does anyone have any further questions? Does anyone from our residents have any questions? We have a microphone set up. If you'd like to come up and use the microphone so that the people at home on the video hear. And if you could introduce yourself and ask your question. So the mic is the person on the right-hand side and it goes green.
Does it work? Yes. Thank you very much for the presentations. Gauthier Well, I am an HNF resident as well as the editor of the Green Londoner. I had two questions. My first question is more general. I've read the preparatory documents for this meeting, and I noticed that climate neutrality or net zero is no longer listed as the main climate goal, as the council officially dropped this objective for 2030. My second question relates to the extra funding for climate change projects. It's great to see that the funding for the climate and ecology team will remain consistent. However, if I understood correctly, there will be an additional £120,000 allocated to support ecology projects. While this is a positive step, it represents just 1% of the proposed additional investment of £12.3 million. which seems quite limited given the current climate emergency. Could you provide more details on the type of impact you're aiming to make with this additional funding? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. I think it's really important to stress the difference between revenue and capital spending. So the majority of our investment in climate and in sustainability will be on the capital side of the budget. So it's things like big projects to improve the sustainability of our housing developments and these sorts of things. Now these are paid for over a long period as part of our capital budget. The money in the revenue budget that we're adding this year is to help in terms of bidding for larger sums of money. So this isn't the be all and end all of the money that we're investing in climate change and sustainability. This is just to make sure that we're better equipped to be able to make applications for larger pots of funding. For instance, in lots of areas, even for fairly small pots, you need to be able to have an amount set aside so that you can match fund. So this will allow us to do that sort of thing. But no, the big changes are going to be done through the capital budget, and you'll see an awful lot of investment there in terms of how we're making the borough cleaner and greener. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the net zero question? I don't think, Hinesh, no? I just don't think it was mentioned. I don't think there's been a change.
No, there's been no change.
Strategy, no. Well, thank you very much. I think that concludes the questions. Oh, we have one more from a resident. No, of course, carry on. Yeah, resident first, and then we'll go to Councillor Harcourt on screen after.
Thank you. My name is David Wilkins. I'm a resident in the borough. I have a very general question. We're halfway between the council declaring an emergency in 2019 and 2030, more or less. Are you confident that we're going to get to net zero by 2030? And can we put that on record somewhere?
Councillor Harcourt, did you hear that?
David, could you repeat that? I didn't quite hear what you said.
I said we're about halfway between the council declaring a climate emergency in 2019 and the borough being net zero by 2030. Are you confident that we're going to get there?
Thank you. I think my comment both to yourself and to the previous speaker is that we still have the target. Can everybody hear me? Yep.
Just about. You're very quiet. If you can turn your volume up.
Okay. Hopefully that's better. Is that we have a target of 2030. That target has not been abandoned. It goes without saying, I think, that it is a very challenging target. There's no two ways about that. And David, you're quite right that we're halfway there. We've spent a lot of the first part of the period since 2019 looking at strategies, how we're going to approach this and the work that's got to be done. But we're now looking very much to concentrating on delivery. And so the sort of capital projects and things that Councillor Ree was talking about are going to become much... Excuse me. This is why I'm not here in person, which is going to become much more important. You know, at the same time, we're focusing very much on net zero carbon by 2030. But at the same time, you know, some things that are happening, we've seen all the business in Los Angeles and other places recently. Some of the work around adaptation is becoming perhaps a little bit more urgent. And so we're having to look at that, which is in the strategy, our climate change strategy, but it's having to take a slightly greater priority at the moment for obvious reasons. I'm not suggesting that you know, suddenly London's going to be engulfed in a wildfire, but we've seen floods in London. We saw wildfires the other year on the outskirts of London and various other things like that. So, you know, looking at protecting people as they are at the moment, it becomes increasingly important.
Yes, thanks for that, Councillor Harcourt. I completely agree with you. And I think it's a really important question at the moment, particularly with the way the American government are looking at denying climate change. And I stand by, having sat on this committee for the last 2.5 years, I stand by what the council is doing is really proactive and also really successful. All the investment in the SUDs and ecology and all the planning that's going into developments that particularly that the council have the freehold over has been really, really quite impressive. But Councillor Harcourt, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Sorry, Chair. No, I was just going to come in on the points that and questions that other people had raised. You know, I know I'm online, but I am here effectively to take any questions as well. But there's been an incredible amount of work, you know, that has gone on, and I don't think perhaps like so many people, so many places, we just don't actually make a point about the work we've done. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and go through all the things we've achieved because it's going to be impossible. I'll take up most of the meeting. But, you know, just a couple of things. For instance, you know, housing, homes strategy. We've set up a community benefit society, you know, looking at community energy. That's been set up. That's on its way. We're looking at new sites for that. There's been lots of grant funding to low-income households and small, medium enterprises for energy efficiency measures. There's the passive house work that we're doing on Hartop, Lannoy and Farm Lane, Lily Road and such like. On top of that, there's the retrofit programme that's gone on in Franklin Square and is ongoing at the moment. You know, I could go on and on with this sort of work. So yes, it is very, very challenging, as I said earlier, but there's we're doing our damnedest to get this work done at a good pace. And there's a lot more that is being done, but perhaps it is quite correct that we don't sing our praises or sing very loudly about the work that we've done. And one of the things when Councillor Reid was earlier talking about green investment, the whole purpose, or not the whole purpose, but part of the purpose of that is raising awareness and getting members of the public, our residents, involved in the whole process of adapting and also the work towards making sure that we protect against climate change. And the projects that we've been doing, and again, I can go through them if you really want me to, they're designed to be things that stand out to members of the public. Sadly, I'm not there tonight, but there is actually a badge that we've designed. So each of these projects under the green investment will have a nice little sort of enamel badge on it saying this has been paid for by residents in the green investment. And that's part of this process of actually raising the profile of the work we're doing and raising awareness of the climate change. You know, so for so many people, it's a question of, do you agree with climate change? Do you think it's a problem? Is it something you'll be interested in doing something about? And the answer comes back, yes. But then they don't, you then have to try and translate that into action. And that's where the difficulty comes in. And the work around the green investment actually shows the sort of things that people can do themselves to achieve this.
Thank you, Councillor Harcourt. I've got one more question from the gallery. Come on.
Thank you, Councillor Harcourt, and thanks everyone for trying your best for the environment. We appreciate it. I just wanted to ask, as part of your trumpeting, how are you going with encouraging people to eat plant-based? It's very simple. It's the most effective a single person can do to reduce their carbon footprint. And with our many thousand residents, if we encouraged our 94,000 dwellings, if we encouraged our citizens to become plant-based, we could really make a massive difference to this borough's carbon footprint.
Yes, I think that's a little bit off topic for tonight, but thanks for making the point, and we will be addressing that in future committees. Thank you. Well, I think thank you very much for the presentations. I think it's really optimistic, really good stuff. Thank you. And I think we can note that the Policy and Accountability Committee considers the budget proposals and makes recommendations to Cabinet as appropriate. That the committee considers the proposed changes to fees and charges and makes recommendations as appropriate. We're noting the reports. Thank you. And then we're going to move on to item number 2, on number 6 on the agenda, motion for the ocean, the Inland Council sign up. And presenting is Grace Clifford from the Ocean Conservation Trust. Thanks very much for coming today. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just hopefully going to share the thing. So many windows. That looks okay. Everyone's happy to see it. Cool. So, hello. Good. My name is Grace. I'm the Ocean Advocacy Manager at the Ocean Conservation Trust. And I hope to talk to you a little bit about the ocean. What I would like to do first is just everyone to look at the screen and look at the image that I've put up there. And just look at that image and just think about what that makes you feel and how you feel watching it. If you were to be out there, do you picture yourself in it? Are you thinking about how blue it is? Does it make you feel creative? Is it making you calm? Because the proportions of blue to green in this image are a replica of how the world is. And a lot of people report feeling much calmer looking at blue imagery. And I feel like I probably don't need to say it to the people in the room here, but just to reinforce it, that the ocean produces over half of the world's oxygen and can absorb up to 50 times more carbon dioxide than our atmosphere, which is one of the main reasons that we as the Ocean Conservation Trust support a healthy movement to a healthy ocean, so that we can look after our planet for not just now, but generations to come. So we exist as a people connection kind of charity. We're an ocean conservation charity, yes, but we're also centered around people and positive action. And it's really hammering home about optimism, because I think everyone can also probably agree that sometimes it can get a bit negative space when you're reading lots of facts. So we go in with lots of optimism and the fact that pro-ocean behavior can be a step that anyone can take, and it's very small steps that people... Is that a bit better? Hello? Oh, I can hear myself better. Thank you. But that any little habit or any little pro-ocean behavior movement can all add up in a big wave of change. And so a little bit about where we are. This is the National Marine Aquarium. So this is where I call home when I'm not here in London. It's based in Plymouth, and it has been there for 25 years. And we've got our aquarium that is based as our centre of excellence. Why lose my mouse? A brief bit about our funding. A large portion of it comes from our ticket sales from that, and gift aid and donations. And we also do corporate funding and go for grants as frequently as possible, and can echo some of the benefits of match funding for an NGO. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the ocean. And why am I saying ocean and not oceans? And that's to do with the basis of us, a lot of our communication, which is to do with ocean literacy. So when you think of the ocean, it doesn't actually have any boundaries. There's no wall halfway. So everyone should be hopefully embracing one ocean with 5 basins. And that is a movement that is being reflected in education as they go up through school, learning about the ocean, is the fact that it's one big space. And we identify that as a really core way to connect people, because if you're here in London, perhaps a little further away from the ocean, things that you do can act and then impact on people, not just locally, but globally as well. So I don't know how common it is that people know about ocean literacy. But these are the principles of ocean literacy, and it's really much like carbon literacy. It's the same echoing. It's understanding our role on the ocean and the ocean's influence on us, and it underpins a huge amount that we do as an ocean conservation trust. But we clearly consider it an outcome. So you'll do lots of ocean connecting activities, but you will then become ocean literate in how we talk about the ocean and our impacts on it. So loosely just running through some of our programs. We have three main pillars, which is experiences and our advocacy and our habitats. And that is so that we can excite and engage people on any level, whether that's like locally in Plymouth or through some of our online activities. Our ocean advocacy is Think Ocean, so that we can engage and connect with everybody from the local level and decision making all the way up to government and international level. And our ocean habitats is our core program to do with blue meadows, which is seagrass. So our marine aquarium is host to 5,000 animals, and we have a host of exhibits and environments and habitats that take people through the journey of what's locally found in Plymouth and British waters, and then out to the Atlantic Ocean. And we have, we're a member of the BIASA, so that's the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That does a lot for the sector in putting forward not just things that are beneficial for animal welfare, but it's a learning and teaching across the sector and in different ways that we do it. We're a huge leader for how we train not just like work experience students, but all the way up to veterinary and more. We have a lovely, lovely and incredibly talented engagement team, and it's mainly promoting around the ocean access. And I will loosely list these because I think it's just highlighting the importance of how you can get your communities involved, no matter small and different areas. So with Ocean for All, so those of you who've had the headsets on this evening, we take those into care homes as well and get them interacting with that. And it often inspires us to talk about the ocean and memories about the ocean. And we have things like there's an image up on the screen that is the snorkeler, and that is from our Blue Mind. So we're working with Blue prescribers to take people who are perhaps having mental health difficulties and working through that, taking them from a space where they haven't engaged with the ocean to hopefully ending up in the ocean snorkeling and seeing what's in Plymouth Sound. But there's a diverse range of things. Education is one of the key things that we think helps underpin, and this is where we ask councils and schools, and we've been engaging with the government reviews on putting ocean literacy within the curriculum and getting lots of engagement through kind of schools, and particularly when thinking about the climate in general. So I hope that this little video will play. But this is a group of children who are doing an experiment about what the effects of carbon dioxide would have on the ocean in a slightly micro way of blowing bubbles into a test tube or bigger tube of water that has universal indicator, so they can physically see what's happening when we chuck a load of carbon dioxide into the ocean. It's changing its acidity level, and so how important it is to guard that resource. And it's honestly one of the best workshops, and it's called Climate Conundrum. So it's already posing a question, not a doom and gloom. It's exciting people. And then just to squiz over some Blue Meadows, which is our incredible, amazing, powerful plant. It's the only flowering plant in the ocean. And the one that we specialize in is called Zostra marina. And it's a subtidal seagrass. But you guys have down the road in the Thames dwarf eelgrass, which is intertidal, and our friends at ZSL, Zoological Society London, have a project that look at that, which because of the nature of seagrass, which is a huge carbon capture, nitrogen removal, coastal protection, biodiversity hotspot, fishery support, it's an incredible plant. I would encourage to look at that in general. But we look at it in Plymouth about how to support others to do it, and we look at it at scale. So we're really looking at just creating loads of these. There's 4 sites across the southwest that we have, and we get loads of people engaged, and we're protecting them as well as restoring through our amazing team. So the pictures and images there are us growing seagrass in the lab, and then we take those kind of Hessian mats that are full of seed plants and plant them back out into the ocean with buoys marking where the areas of protection are. And lastly, probably more interestingly, or I'm biased, so more interestingly, is the ocean advocacy side of our work. So Think Ocean, I love this Think Ocean because it just allows you to think ocean every single time. It's a good thing to adopt. I would also like to ask, and don't worry, there is no judgment here. You can close your eyes or not close your eyes, but just to raise a hand if you've either walked out of a room and then been told to turn the light off because you're not in that room, and perhaps you've done that in the last 6 weeks. And perhaps maybe the dodgy yogurt pot that you didn't want to clean out, maybe that didn't make it to the recycling, maybe that just is on the side, or perhaps tossed into the bin. This is the kind of thing where it's like, we're all human. We are all human. It's okay that you don't do this all of the time. We only have like a certain amount of capacity in a day. But the encouragement to Think Ocean is that no matter how small those like little actions you can take, is that they all will add up and put to a huge wave of change. All ocean puns everywhere. But encouraging people to be the voice for the ocean and championing its role within our planet. We cover 6 areas in our advocacy, which loosely I've gone over a couple of them and how our education, habitats and things. And I'll go on to the others in a second. But I also felt like I need to echo the same thing that kind of, whilst we are all promoting to engage with the ocean and think of the ocean, we also have to think of our own impacts. So our building at the National Marine Aquarium is going through its own journey of net zero itself, and updating all its systems so that we can be carbon neutral and the best way that we can be for the thing. So we're aware that we're doing our own work on our own side as well. Something that I feel like you'll feel echoes of is the power of marine citizenship. So it sounds like your lovely people who live here are very passionate people who are talking about climate and the ecology of the area, which is fabulous to see. Something that we know is that, and it goes back to the light switch thing, we know it's good to turn it off. We know that it's good to recycle stuff. Do we do it all the time? No, not necessarily, but that's okay. But sometimes you have to have a really strong emotional connection to something in order for you to actually do something about it. So I love the ocean so much that I will make more conscious of an effort to turn that light off, to recycle that little thing. The same way that there's lots of people who have their own passions about different things. Maybe it's about an animal, maybe it's about seagrass. We all are motivated, but it usually comes to a really strong emotional connection. And there's a fabulous paper called Citizens of the Sea, which is by Dr. Pam Buckham, who helped create the emotion for the ocean, that kind of just says about how that connection and being a marine citizen is a right that you can have. I'm doing it a disservice, but I honestly think it's one of the most amazing pieces of stuff to write, but it informs some of the motion stuff, so I will carry on. Something that also is interesting, in 2020, we carried out the biggest ocean literacy survey in England and Wales, and that was to kind of understand what people were thinking, and in order to help us inform some of the work and how we do it. So from the survey, nearly 70% of people identified marine litter and plastic pollution, plastic pollution as the top priority, but 77% of them engaged in recycling. So we've kind of got that activity there, but we also had threats that were thinking about chemical pollution and overfishing, which were real big concerns, which obviously recycling isn't necessarily going to be the action that causes change there. So we look at different ways that like people can help. And so something we came up with is the Think Ocean Challenge. And so that is encouraging individuals to like jump in and have a go at a challenge, doing things that are as small as turning off lights or switching your bank, and working out specifically why you'd want to do that for the ocean. So how it connects, and what you're kind of doing. And this little quiz, you end up in a shoal and you're either a head, you think with your head, your heart, your hands, perhaps you're a canoer or a diver, you're in the water, or perhaps you're brand new and you're a new starter. So we take you on a journey as to how to engage. One of the actions is also to write to your council and do a motion for the ocean, if that's the way that you feel. So those are the kind of things that you can see. And then lastly, just to touch on some of the stuff that we've worked with and kind of encouraging you guys to adopt a motion for the ocean is we've been visiting Parliament, we've said about our Blue Meadows, we engage regularly with our BIASA Public Affairs Working Group. So we're doing stuff not just for the ocean, but for the wider nature and climate sector. And one of the biggest things that we're involved in with my colleague, who is the head of ocean advocacy engagement, Nicola Bridge, she has helped get us involved, really stuck in for the UN decade of the Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and their Challenge 10 white paper, which she co-wrote. And it's all about reconnecting society's relationship with the ocean. The fact that we've kind of lost it a bit, we need to find our way back. And that's like stewardship and supporting that. And within that, there's recommendations for policymakers. I appreciate the writing is a little bit small, but it's kind of supporting that at the local action as well as or shouting about it nationally. So I can now move on to Motion for the Ocean. And I suppose, why here? Why now? I had probably quite a wonderful meeting, what I thought was very nice, in the rain at the Labour Party conference with Nicole. It was sharing an umbrella underneath, and eventually, obviously, we got talking about the ocean. And that's how this kind of born with lots of, I felt Nicole's passion, I felt your representation of your area was definitely something that was keen, that came across about climate issues and flooding and things that affect. The other thing that I'm slightly biased about is we have no London councils that have declared a motion for the ocean yet. I would like you to be the first. And it sounds like from all of the things that I've heard already, that it sounds like you're already doing a lot of things that can do it. And also the fact that you live near the Times. And the fact that it's tidal. And like loads of people seem to forget, a lot of people from London don't recognize the fact that tidal means ocean and we're connecting. And like as a cliche as it is, all rivers lead to the sea, all they go to the ocean. So we're all connected. And then water cycle as well. We're going to get that back as rain, and maybe it will be me and Nicole under umbrella again, talking about perhaps how we've signed a motion for the ocean. But to talk about it in more detail and just briefly summarize about where it came from was a desperate need for people to have kind of a connective, collaborative approach to something that was clearly passionate from individuals within constituency areas, and supporting things that were growing at the same time. So Pam, Dr. Pam is one of the key people who was a councillor at the time within Plymouth and works for the Exeter University. Emily Cunningham was the leader, the representative of the LGA Coastal SIG, and Nicola Bridge, I've mentioned before, is from the Ocean Conservation Trust, and collaboratively alongside the LGA Coastal SIG, they pulled together this kind of idea that we could have a motion so that local government is just as an important actor within marine policy, and can have a voice, and the fact that communities and local councils can put pressure on national government as well. And the fact that the ocean is a common good, and the stakeholder is everybody. So we kind of, not just at the small individual level, we all kind of have a responsibility to that. So this is text taken from the model motion, but the idea that was just to reflect the fact that we were trying to include the fact that it's to be made accountable, and that good intentions will come with actions, and trying to integrate things into policy that you either already have or new policy as it comes out, a consideration for the ocean. And particularly highlighting the important role of the planning and nature strategies for delivering actual change. The fact that local councils are a massive, important, influential leader across sectors. So like, I feel like somebody mentioned earlier, where it's looking at procurement, it's looking at different parts of every arm of it, you can weave it all in. And we ask that councils, obviously I'm sitting here from a coastal point of view, but it's the fact that yes, coastal nations have a responsibility, but also inland councils can tweak this, and that's why we've delivered two. And it's different responsibilities, like the recognition that it's a source to sea approach in multiple phases, and the fact that digital resources can be just as important as physical ocean walks or needs. At the time of the creation, so it's been through like tweaking here and there to what it is today, but there was a paper released from Plymouth University that kind of shouted about changing government's approach to decision making, particularly based around marine, and ensuring that fisheries and coastal communities are included, but marine plastic pollution tackling goes further, and that the support of natural and social science research is included in just as valuable as like hard data science, I suppose. And so just to show a few examples of how different councils have taken it on is the South Tyneside Council. So these were one of the first ones, and they were the lead authority for the LJ Coastal SIG. And they did, and I heard mentioning earlier of recycling and contracts and things. They've put in new bins and signage and get people doing that, and having a bit more of a public campaign about it, and linking it also to the ocean education. Then we have the fact that it's a very flexible motion into how you would like to add bits and make yourself accountable. So there have been Norfolk Council produced, again, I can appreciate that's very tiny writing, but they've got an online portal. So a lot of it is online so that anyone could have an access to it. And kind of that also says the importance of ocean literacy, and labels some of that, but also highlights the stuff that the council are already doing, and just key links to things that are adding to the collective good. Plymouth added a few lines in their local action plan. Can I make it big enough? But considerations about water quality and water entering from like drainage to the sea. And Monmouth had key parts in their action plan as well, specifically relating to like being a more active within river management. But they've also had different things where people have gone out and done litter picks or beach cleans or whatever river activities. They have done, there was a only rain down the drain artwork set up as well. And there was some council that have like written communications to MPs so that they can have concerns of their local residents raised in a formal method that way. There was adaptation within planning considerations within like effects on the ocean were also better for the climate and environment generally. And there was a canoe little pick as well, via canoe going up rivers and things. So it's diverse in its nature. So I pose the question, could you consider signing a motion for the ocean? There's lots more links and things as well, and anyone is welcome to talk to me about anything else. And the thing that I should mention on the end there is, as council, is the third link, as council sign up, there is the Knowledge Hub. I don't know if you're aware of it, the Knowledge Hub. There's a group on there that is all those who have signed or are developing motions for the ocean. And they share tips, tricks and questions, and a space for like councillors to talk to other councillors, as well as having influence from us. And I am a resource, full stop. So that's kind of me wrapped up. If anyone has any questions, that's welcome to.
Thanks very much, Grace. That was a fantastic presentation. And I should mention that you've actually got some VR headsets for after the meeting if people want to try the virtual reality under the ocean experience. But thank you very much for the presentation. That was really good. I think one thing I'd like to just start off with is the River Thames and the relationship that, you know, the reason we invited you is to make that connection, that the Thames, you're not just out there dealing with an ocean that we're not connected to. We're a small island that's completely surrounded by ocean, and the River Thames runs through, and I think we're all very aware of how polluted the Thames is. I mean, the discussion of whether the Thames could be swimmable in the next few years is really important to us in Hammersmith and Fulham. I know we do have litter picks. I think maybe that's one of the people we should invite to a committee in the future, because I think there are groups that go and do litter picks in Hammersmith and Fulham off the Thames. But coming up with different ideas, I think this is great to introduce this, that it's really important for us here. The ownership, it does get tricky. I think Hinesh might know about this, but the ownership of our stretch of the Thames is tricky, because I think the Port of London actually are the owners as such. But we have had Thames Water here in the past, who we tried to hold accountable for their sewage dumping, and I think nationally that's going to be challenged by this government. But one of the things that Hammersmith and Fulham I know that we're doing is working on sustainable drainage, so that less drainage is going straight into the river, because what we've seen before is if we have a sewage system built 200 years ago that is not really effective for us now, so we're having to mitigate by sustainable drainage, etc. Now, having said all that, none of that's really a question. I know we're interested in, I'm sure my fellow councillors would like to ask some questions, and people here, but I'm sure we are interested in putting a motion. I think we have some recommendations for the motion that we will put forward, hopefully, to, if we're all in agreement at the end of the meeting, to full council. So I'm going to say thank you and pass on to my colleagues to see if they have anything to add.
Yeah, really inspiring and interesting. And as Nicole said, we have the Thames here. Can you just give some examples of, apart from, you know, litter picking, and what other proactive things we can do, from, you know, encouraging children to elderly, and how that, even the smallest thing, if we can do it, how that impacts when you get down to the Thames estuary and further, what the results would be of your actions. Yeah, thank you.
What a wonderfully huge question.
Sorry, it's big, isn't it? Sorry.
I love it. So yeah, like lots of going to be cheeky with the selfless plug here and encourage you to do a Think Ocean challenge, because those contain lots of like tiny little actions. They're like small micro habits that seem achievable to just build up and build up. And it's also the like science communication or like main communication about how you word it in motivating people, like the changing energy or cutting down plastic. Some of these are very obvious ones, but like going through and switching your bank and things, where you're thinking about perhaps it's a carbon impact, and then less carbon in the atmosphere means less strain on the ocean. And that
Can I just ask, when you say switching your bank,
yeah,
are you saying if you do switch your bank, you are creating a detrimental effect, or if you decide to stay with it, or choosing a
better,
sustainable bank?
Yes, a sustainable bank.
Right.
I should definitely word that better.
No,
That's
it's just sometimes the way I think. So yeah.
Yes, yeah. So
and can you name the good ones?
Yeah,
Can we
that would be
shame the
useful.
bad ones?
Can we share?
Because I'm just about to get one for my son, so I may as well get the right one.
Currently, my mind is blank about the good one that we do. We usually encourage people to do their own research, because it then allows them to put, you know, if your consideration is it's a child and I need the best for investment in the future, perhaps there's a middle ground of being like, right, this one's better, is more environmentally friendly. But there are some big name ones that are quite common that are known to be quite exhaustive environmentally, that I think a quick Google search will probably come up with. Is that a nice on the fence answer? But yeah, we're usually encouraging people, and a lot of people then will share that kind of stuff through social media and stuff. That's what we're trying to build up in this next year, as we want to raise voices everywhere, is trying to build that community, which is why the shoal through the Think Ocean Challenge exists, because it's the kind of like knowing that you're not alone is just as important. So if it's in your community and you're doing, if it's just you doing a litter pick, there's probably going to be one day where you're like, I don't feel like doing this. But then you look across and there's somebody else doing it. And it's like, oh, I'm not alone. And it's all that kind of encouraging behavior. So sharing about it, which it sounds like you to a degree do, but also haven't done enough, about your amazing stuff that's already going on. If people are well aware of doing that, that can encourage people with further action. And there's been cases where this kind of one council, I forget which council, was it Blandford Forum, where one of the councillors dressed up as a womble and went around and did their litter pick and kind of did that and then put it into recycling and stuff. But that was much more a visual thing for the community and kind of got more of buy-in from them and joining with those kind of activities. But also encouraging people to choose different options, like walking if they can, or cycling, and then using public transport and cars and things less, those kind of things. And again, kind of tying it back into the why are you doing that, to create less carbon dioxide or create less emissions. And equally doing things where it's like doing things that you love as well. So like just talking to your family about the ocean can be good to then inspire them and get emotionally connected. And those kind of things, that means that perhaps then the next time you're walking past the Thames and stuff, it's oh, I think I'm gonna do something about that because I feel more inspired. So that's a brief summary of small little bits. Did I answer your question fully?
No, that was and it was kind of more other practical things you can do, but it's blanket. It's the same sort of language as we're putting with the air and biodiversity, everything, isn't it?
I think a lot of it as well is that kind of connecting the thoughts of being like, this is no disrespect to any policies that already exist, but it's obviously climate and nature policy or climate thing. And often, even when we talk about like rewilding, people forget rewilding what we do, which is planting plants in the ocean and those kind of things. So connecting the dots that you're not just helping like one portion of it, and how you can motivate within that whole cycle, and then weaving the ocean in more, because we're all ocean stewards, can help kind of build that momentum, I suppose.
We do have somebody who wants to ask a question. Do you want to come up and introduce yourself? No.
Anna Maynard, a local resident and sailor, London Corinthians Sailing Club, litter picker, seal spotter, and Sons of the Thames rower. So could I ask you, how does animal agriculture impact the ocean? And have you addressed the impact of diet in your Think Ocean Challenge?
I can answer the last bit. So as part of the Think Ocean Challenge, there is a line that considers to eat less meat and just go reduce your meat content, whilst everybody's kind of figuring out what's the best solution. I think reducing meat is, or considering your dietary choices, even if it's not, because something I think that is very core through some of our stuff that I've mentioned before is the fact that accessibility to all of these things, that's another thing that really drives us, is like you might not be able to afford the best choice of food, or you might not be able to do the you know, amazing trip that will inspire you, but having the ability to either access it virtually or choosing something else. So if you can't, you know, choose any differently with your diet, changing your bank and doing light switching off can add up to those. So there is the dietary question that is added in there. Did you want to?
You mentioned expensive. Were you suggesting that it's expensive to eat plant-based? Or was that, have I got the wrong end of the stick? Sorry.
It's like an additional. So I think different people, different budgets. So it doesn't necessarily have to be more expensive. I think that's different, different people's experience of it. But that, I think my point was like, yes, we address it in the Think Ocean Challenge. It's consider your diet. But also we encourage the fact that not all people will maybe be able to choose that as an action that they take.
And so could you answer the first part of the question, is how does animal agriculture impact the ocean?
So through the way that we work, it's not necessarily something that we specifically like look at as a cause, but how we view it, if we step it all back to very simplistic things of being like, everybody is connected to the ocean. If everybody recognizes their connection to the ocean, then they are more likely to change what they do. We're definitely open as the Ocean Conservation Trust to working with people across across sectors to work out their connection to the ocean, and also what they can do and change to things. So I'm aware that there are conversations that go along with upstream. So part of the Ocean Conservation Trust, whilst it doesn't necessarily directly affect farmers or agriculture, I don't want to lump all farmers or everything, but agricultural practices is like a negative to waterways, is just to say that it's a sea to source thing. So that attitude helps as well.
Can I thank you for that? Are you suggesting, sorry, I'm thinking about overfishing. Are you talking about overfishing and the demand for eating fish as well as the demand for eating meat? Sorry.
It's a combination of things with the massive intensive agricultural farms. They scrape out the excrement, they spread it on the fields, and then it rushes straight into the water. And then there's masses of algal bloom in America, in the UK. So it's not only the overfishing, it is actually also the impact of land intensive agriculture on the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So if I will add the thing, it's loosely comes back to my first thing of being like, a lot of them, the way that we think about it is that humans are the cause. but then humans can be the solution, like that reconnection with the ocean, inspiring. So there's lots of things that we impact the ocean for, but kind of having people and that connection, hopefully everyone will go, I love the ocean, and start to change their behavior to support that kind of reflective, and eventually we'll get to a nice space. But yeah.
Well, anyone? Oh, yeah, please come up, Pat. Could you introduce yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, no, Pat Tukey, reasonably engaged resident. I think that the council's doing loads of things that you could link to this. Absolutely loads and loads of things that are very obviously linked, like stuff you're doing in education with the kids on the river, loads of stuff about the mitigating surface flooding and so on, SUDS and all of that stuff, all the river investment that the council puts in, the use that local residents make of the river. Yeah, litter picking and everything, great, but maybe the council could actually do a bit more about encouraging and facilitating whichever local voluntary groups and organisations do engage in litter picking, because I haven't ever seen it advertised, and I might well go along if I did. I wanted to add, though, that if the council does support this, which I think I'd be very happy if our council supported this, but if they do, I don't think you should just use it to say, we're doing this good thing and this good thing and this good thing. The whole point of this kind of thing is to say, actually, what else can we do? What would this encourage us to do that would add something? So that's what I'd say. It shouldn't just be oh yeah, we can tick that box off because we're already doing a lot of good things. You need to add some more in. And just on the point that you were making, so use of antibiotics in fish farms, big problem, which spills out into the wild sea creatures, nitrogen runoff, obviously, all of that kind of stuff. So there's loads of things where you can see these connections that you can make. It'd be great.
Thanks very much for that. I completely agree. You know, just at one point in the year, Hammersmith and Fulham becomes quite famous for its river during the boat race. So we can use this particularly when we're on the national stage. So yeah, we'll put that forward as well. Now, I think would anyone like to ask any more questions? Councillor James.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation and to residents and their contributions. I think just building on your last point, really, what additional things do you think we could add to the motion for the ocean to sort of enhance the value there?
I love it. I'm like, anything you want. Anything that I think is
maybe 2 examples that you think could really make a difference based on what you know about our area in particular and the challenges.
I mean, having a connection to every time that you have the national stage of a boat race, and making a commitment for around that time every year, whether that's research related or whether that's action related. But also I think I'd encourage, because I think a lot of the feedback we get, and you've got very impassioned people here, is the fact that it's ensuring that you can match that accountability with the actions that you're feasibly able to take. So I wouldn't want to encourage, I'd be like, yeah, just everybody become ocean lovers, all get down to the Thames, let's sort this out. That's just not actually achievable. As I said, like it's those kind of recycling moments of forgetting the light that just happens because you're human. But having that kind of thing, and the willingness to work within communities as to what they desire as well is something else. So I know that's not really a great answer specifically, but there have been lots of councils that have decided what they wanted just based on their community feedback, like a large portion. I think there's I forget which council it is, have weaved in the Surfers Against Sewage Sea manifesto into theirs, because that was such a massive portion of their community shouting about that. So I might deflect and say, ask your community.
So I suppose something like Rowers Against Sewage, and I don't know if that even is a thing.
Yeah, I think Fulham Reach Boat Club have been quite vocal about the sewage problem local to them. So we should connect up with them and possibly recommend to the comms team about the Womble thing. Any further questions? Well,
I mean, I suppose it just sounds so positive, and you know, and I think there's lots of really interesting kind of hugely important soft benefits in terms of raising awareness and all of that. But I suppose it'd just be interested, one kind of really impressive tangible benefit that you could tell us about from the motion to the oceans around the country. If there's, you know, one thing that stands out as a kind of standout tangible plus.
That's a good one, because it's requiring me to fish back in, fish pun, accidental in my brain about all of the ones that I've read today. But I think there are some that are funding related, and also I think the key, being active for the key voice in between national government. So and the key point of ocean literacy. So putting pressure on national government where it's important has been like felt. Also just the benefit from that, from like communities feeling that their voices are being raised, not just in their local area, but that kind of going forward. And there's been a couple ones that are more funding related, but I'd like to also go back and ping some highlights to you in an email follow-up afterwards, which I think would be better than relying on my brain.
I think that would be really helpful, because I think it'd be nice. I mean, it's great to see all the soft benefits, but obviously we want to make maximum impact as well, and it'd be good to see what tangible benefits we can think of.
Even, I don't know, examples of, I don't know if this would work, but the specific grass, the eel grass, or you know, so that this tangible thing, and how that does impact the reduction of carbon dioxide in the water.
Yeah, so I know that we have stats on our seagrass, but I don't know whether that's the same type of stuff, but all of that can be packaged up, and I will send an email with something that's more concrete and clearer than me trying to fish through the brain of motion ocean stuff across. But yeah, it'd be very cool.
Thank you very much. So I think this is a piece of work that we need to do before presenting it to council. So perhaps if we could do a follow-up, and then we'll work on putting it together to put towards full council as soon as we can. Because I think we're all in favour. All those in favour say aye. Thank you.
Aye, depending on wording.
Depending on wording. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming this evening. Grace is going to stay around for a few minutes with the virtual reality sets if you want to have a look at the ocean. And then I invite everybody to the pub, probably across the road, if you're free. Oh, there's another what? Sorry, we have to, if you're going to, it's going to take a point, it needs to be on mic because people at home, yes, no.
I'm not even going to sit down. Bank accounts, Ethical Consumer will give you a list of what you want. And so will a number of websites. And the really bad one is Barclays. Thank you.
Ethical Consumer, brilliant.
Opportunity to say that.
Thank you all for attending. I think we've had a really good overview of the budget and a brilliant presentation from Grace. Thank you very much for coming. And for the next climate change and ecology PAC, I think we're going to look at active travel. Hopefully we'll have some guests online from Ghent, who we're inviting to present on what they've done around active travel in their area. But also if anyone has any recommendations, I know we might look at Yogo, the yellow buggies, and different cycling asks, you know, what's happening in the borough in terms of active travel. So that's a point for next time, for May the 4th, May the 7th. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the staff for staying. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.